Hi, it's Irene Weinberg, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. Before we get started with the episode, make sure to like and subscribe wherever you're listening or watching so you never miss an episode. Every week, we share heartfelt stories, spiritual insights, and practical guidance to help you navigate grief and trauma, find hope, and discover rebirth after loss. By subscribing, you'll get access to every episode and join our supportive community on this journey. Thanks for being here, and let's dive in. Hi, everyone. I hope this message finds each of you so very well. I'm speaking to you from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and I could not be more delighted to welcome Seidel, who is a TEDx and keynote speaker, an entrepreneur, and the founder of the award-winning Seidel agency, where he amplifies the voices of artists and Fortune 500 leaders who are shaping culture and driving change. Steve is also a best-selling author, the creator of the top 10 Apple podcast Wolves Among Us, and the co-founder of the men's mental health community called gentsjourney.co. At the core of everything Steve builds is a simple but profound mission to do good, give back, and help people reclaim the stories that define their lives. Steve's personal journey is one of profound grief transformed into powerful growth. He has walked through the loss of both parents, cared for his mother through her final years with cancer, and carried the weight of a childhood shaped by divorce and people-pleasing. In 2020, as he welcomed a child, moved across the country, rebuilt his business, bought a home, and supported his mother through her terminal diagnosis. I want to ask Steve, when did you sleep? Steve found strength in community, friendship, and the vulnerability he cultivated in the men's group he founded. Through it all, he has discovered that grief can be more than sorrow. It can become a source of connection, renewal, and the courage to rewrite the stories that shape our lives. Following the recent loss of his mother and the emotional journey surrounding his TEDx talk, Steve continues to walk the path of healing. He is learning in real time how grief can open us, reshape us, and ultimately lead to profound rebirth. His story reflects the very essence of this podcast, that grief can lead to renewal, greater purpose, and deeper human connection. I'm looking forward to talking with Steve about his childhood shaped by divorce and a lifelong pattern of people-pleasing to the sacred time he spent with his mother in her final days. We'll also explore the friendship, connection, and deep vulnerability he's discovered through the men's group he founded. And we'll also talk about the larger terrain of grief, how it breaks us open, reshapes us, and can ultimately lead to profound rebirth. The subtle inner shift that often sparks the biggest transformation, how to recognize when we're carrying something unhealed, and more, as Steve shares how loss has become a compass guiding him toward his healing mission in the world. Hi there, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. I'm your host, author and trauma survivor Irene Weinberg, here to encourage you wherever you are in your healing journey. In each episode, I chat with incredible grief and trauma specialists, healers, mediums, and celebs, as well as remarkable people who have inspiring healing stories to share. If you're looking for a podcast that's both uplifting and inspiring, you've found it. Let us help you find your joy in life. Hi, Steve. From my heart, a warm welcome to Grief and Rebirth podcast.
Thank you, Irene, for that wonderful intro. Thank you for sharing your story and sharing a lot more before we had this conversation about really helping change people's lives and giving them the tools that they need to shift towards happiness, joy, peace. It's a beautiful intro. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak.
My pleasure. Feel free. Some people have asked me, can I use your intro? Because I, and those who listen to the podcast know that it's really important to me that people I'm talking to, that they know who you are. and they know your
Yes.
background, and you've been through so much. So, and you've come through it, and you're still coming through it, and you're healing, which is so admirable, and you're inspiring others. So let's start with your childhood that was shaped by divorce and a
Sure.
lifelong pattern of people pleasing, which so many people listening to this can relate to. So, could you talk to us about how those early experiences shaped who you became and eventually sparked this powerful inner shift within you?
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's a constant journey. We're all on this journey, right? There's no destination. And so, I was working with a therapist maybe like right after my mom passed away, that I tried everything. And one of the things he suggested was a book called No More Mr. Nice Guy. So if there's any guys out there, check out this book. It's pretty awesome. But part of that upbringing that I've had from being the product of a divorce relationship was finding myself in the middle of my mom and my dad, obviously, and trying to figure out at a young age, how can I solve this? How can I make this right? How can I fix it? And so for me, it was constantly, okay, there's a disagreement happening, whether it's, who stays with whom, the money that's due, any family argument that would arise. I was the happy-go-lucky guy
Wow.
who would try to keep the stitching together, if you will, so that it didn't rip open. And it took me quite some time to realize that now I call myself a recovering people pleaser. And I think that awareness and reflection is key towards the journey that we're all on. But back then, it felt as if I was in the middle. And if I didn't solve it, if I didn't make it right, then ultimately, I think deep down inside, I thought that my parents weren't going to love me, obviously. Mm-hmm. But as we grow older, we realize that everything happens for a reason. They shape who we are. There's a lot more to, the combo of nature versus nurture. And so that's what brought me towards the connection that I bring to everything and becoming a connector, if you will.
Well, I actually kind of admire that you're such an open person. I mean, from all the things that you've done and how you grow and how open-minded you are to healing and helping yourself, I think it's just wonderful. Um, so I want to ask you, when you think about healing from all that you've been done, what is the first misconception you wish more people understood?
So that's a great question. You asked amazing questions. So the biggest misconception around healing is that you need to be wounded to heal, or that something is broken, or something is wrong with you that needs to be fixed. We are all human. We are all carrying baggage. I work with a mentor who says, do your best to leave your baggage at the door, just like you're entering the the airplane terminal. But we are all wounded. We all have flaws. Nobody is perfect. And so healing is not meant to make you feel less than. It's not meant to make you feel like you are not full, because we are all full in our own ways, in our own the ways that we're built. And so talking about grief sometimes from a man's perspective can make you feel inferior, can make you feel flawed, and can make you feel as if it's not okay. And I think it's changing. We talk a lot about that in my men's group. What does masculinity mean in today's day and age versus our parents who had one job? They had to look tough.
Right.
So
they couldn't look out of their box.
Couldn't step out of the box. So healing for me, and it's not, there's no one size fits all. And it's a continuous journey. I'd like to say you heal forward, just kind of like when you fail forward with the business. It's going to happen. So the more that you can be open, you have a safe community, and I think really sharing that with others is crucial so that they can see you for who you are. For me, I need to be mindful to not put myself in a position where I'm looking for validation, where somebody says, you're okay, you're going to do great. It's more of my own journey, but it does help to have people who see you that you can share this with.
Absolutely. I also have a theory that men are afraid to be vulnerable, so when they're experiencing grief and all, they don't want to open up because they're supposed to be strong and they're supposed to, not be that sensitive or whatever. So how can you advise someone if they are carrying something unhealed, because a lot of people are not even in touch with their feelings and what's
Sure.
going on to know that.
So one of the things that I talk a lot about from a business perspective, but business, personal and professional, they're intertwined. They all have to deal with relationships. You know, we want to do good, but we want to be great. And for great, it's an acronym that I try to focus upon. Every single day, I want to be great. I want to deliver greatness. And yes, you're going to have tough moments. You're going to be down. You're going to lose friends, family members, jobs. Loss is a part of who we are. But when we become overly attached to certain things, that's where that suffering can come in. So pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. So when we show up as being great, the acronym stands for being grateful. Being grateful for what we have. When we showcase that gratitude, especially people say when you're in a tough position, give back, volunteer, start giving to your local communities. The R stands for be reflective. Look at the mirror, see your greatness, see you for who you are, see the person looking at you in the mirror. Much like Michael Singer's book, An Untethered Soul, that person that looks through those eyes is the same person it's always been, and it's pure magic. So being reflective and being able to recognize that. E stands for being empathetic. It's okay to be down. It's okay to have rough moments, but find that empathy in others as well. You know, if they cut you off or they're in the deli line and they get mad at you, you know, they're having a rough moment. It's not any representation of what you did, which as a people pleaser, we often think something I did upset
and it's
them.
our job, right? And it's our job to fix it.
100%. And then the A stands for accountable. Is coming from Philadelphia. I'm a Philly native. I like to say what I do what I say, and be accountable. And if you say you're going to do something, your trust is imperative, but you also need to be able to trust yourself. And then lastly is being transformational. And so I'm in a group. It's actually led by Pat Croce. He's the former owner of the Sixers. And when I moved to Lexington, I was having a rough time. I didn't have a lot of friends. And as a mentor, he said, look, come from a place of happiness. Come from happiness, not for happiness. And oftentimes when we find ourselves in a rough moment where there's grief or loss, we look for this happiness outside of ourselves. We look for this joy outside of ourselves. But that's when it's a great time to journal, to be reflective, to be with our thoughts, to listen to music, to find different ways that we can meditate so that we can tap into this happiness that exists within us.
That's fabulous. And I want to ask you also, which is so pivotal to your story, is your mother, being with your mother in her final moments, and talk about grief and talk about the attitude. And how did that change you? Tell us about that. You talked a lot about that in your TEDx talk.
Yes.
Which was wonderful.
Thank you. So that was a blessing. I almost said curse, but it's not a curse. But for me, that moment was a blessing, obviously. But when you're in that moment, it's probably one of the most challenging things that you could ever think about. It felt like I was in a dream.
I mean, your mother was taking her literally last breath.
Yeah. When you talked about this earlier, even now when I talk about it, I'm getting, my hands are getting clammy and emotional. So I'll kind of set the stage. I lost both my parents within 5 years. I was living in California. My dad was sick. He had some issues and he had to have his leg amputated. And then my mom said, look, I think you should go visit your father. And it may be woo-woo, but I feel like we're all connected. And my mother and I had this deep, profound connection where we could communicate without conversation. It's just countless things that have happened in our lives. But I went back. I saw my father. I gave him my blessings. I have 2 half brothers. I said, they're going to be okay. We're going to take care of them. He died the next day. And so I was the last person to see him, shake his hand. I told him he was going to have a granddaughter. And then, less than 5 years later, my mom, we moved to California, from California to Lexington in 2020, and my mom got sick. And so I said, you're going to come and live with us. I was always a mama's boy. She took care of me. We were connected. We would watch 2020. We would read People magazines together. I didn't go out with friends in high school. She was my best friend. And so when she got sick, she came here and she traveled back and forth. But the final moments, I told her that we were going to bring her to hospice in Philadelphia because we grew up in Pennsylvania, and she lit up and she was very excited. My sister, fortunately, had just visited and had left the day before. For some reason, I didn't leave. And then, she was having some issues and I was with her. In her final moments, I was able to FaceTime everyone in our family so they could all
Wow.
talk to her. And it kind of puts me back into that position of people pleasing. But for me, it wasn't necessarily that. It was being a vessel or being an instrument to connect her with everyone that she loved in those final moments. And it was very surreal. One instance that came, her favorite song that we used to talk a lot about was Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And so I actually had a playlist of her songs that I would play for her. So I played all of her music while she was passing through. And so we played Somewhere Over the Rainbow, or I did because I was the only one there. And we had a moment where she was struggling and our eyes locked. And I saw one tear actually come down her cheek while she was listening to Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And so it was a blessing for her to allow me to be with her in those final moments. And then afterwards, she had always said, look, you are a teacher, you're a therapist, you're a coach, you help bring people together, you deliver them positivity. So when the TEDx came around, I knew this was my opportunity to take her suggestion. And I talk a lot in the TEDx talk about serendipity or things that happen. But there was just so many moments from the moment when I was calling all of her friends and a cardinal came and hit my window. A cardinal is meant to be, symbolic of somebody from beyond. Right. And then another cardinal would sit outside my window every single day while I would work.
She was saying hello.
She was saying hello. I have a poem that I wrote. It's called Fries at the Bottom of the Bag. I wrote it when I was an artist in New York City about the moments when my mom used to pick me up after a sporting event or, a day at school or we would go to the mall, and how those moments with her were just some of the most special moments that we don't really realize. But in retrospect, those were the most powerful moments of sharing, of experience, of caring, of connection. And so I read this we had 2 funerals. I read both of them at our funeral. And then when I went to clean out her house at the estate sale, I was digging through some bags, and at the bottom of one of the bags was a clear bag. And the listeners probably can't see it, but I found it's a little telephone from a McDonald's Happy Meal.
Wow.
So I essentially found the fries at the bottom of the bag that I would speak so highly about these moments that we overlook, that the good times, the special moments, they're happening right now before our eyes. And sometimes we don't realize them, but they're here and they're ready to be cherished.
That's beautiful. I also admire, because I have 3 grandsons and 2 of them are becoming teenagers, and everybody talks about the fact they're going to pull away, they're going to separate out, they're not going to tell you a lot of things. And here you grew closer to your mom through those years,
absolutely.
Which is, I think, unusual and special.
Yeah, it for me, she was my rock, growing up through all the divorce and trials and tribulations, and even, dating. I met my wonderful wife. But while dating, I would call from California and tell her about the dates and all the people that I had met. And yeah, it was truly a special relationship.
Yeah, you're really a sensitive guy and not afraid to show your vulnerability, which is so admirable. And you've also said that grief isn't something we get over. So teach us, how does grief become a teacher rather than a weight? And what role does storytelling or rewriting the narrative play in the healing process, which you've been going through?
Sure, that's a great question. And for me, I remember, I have it right here in my office. My mom bought me a sign a while ago. It says, write your own story. And we're all writing our own stories, but there's a multitude of stories that we have in our lives. There's the story that we tell ourselves. Look, we're not enough. I need to get people's validation. There's the story that we see, why we step into the world, and then also the story that we share. And so grief, to me, it's almost like a sidecar. You have a little motorcycle, grief is going to be there. It's not going to go away. We're always going to remember the things, the people, the pets, the jobs that we've lost. But it almost is like when somebody dies, we can sharpen our sword, and gives us a moment of clarity where we can bring out the microscope or bring out the glasses and look deeper into what truly matters in our lives and cherish that. So if somebody's listening to this and their mom and dad is still around, call them, text them, tell them how much that they mean. And that grief, it's a teacher. Everything in life is a teaching moment. It's all happening for a reason. What we go through, we grow through. And it allows us to be stronger, more sensitive, whatever that looks like for you. It's different for individuals, but it's happening so that we can sharpen our instruments. And it's not happening to us, but it's happening for us. And so losing my mom, it happened for me because everybody's going to lose their mom. I had a best friend reach out and says, you know, you're never really a man until you lose your parents or your dad. And so
wow.
That was a great quote for me. It almost, if you think symbolic, you think like you're in battle, if you will. We're not in battle. We're just dodging and weaving and releasing things. I think the more we grow, you talked about our third chapter in life, instead of holding on so tight, holding on to those stories like a clenched fist, we start to release them, and we release our stories, we release our experience, and we give them away so that others may benefit from them. So the more that we can share these stories and what we've gone through, we'll find that others can be inspired and hopefully, you know, live a better life because of that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And what would you say is the small shift that creates the biggest transformation for people?
A small shift, I think, is allowing yourself the permission, giving yourself the permission. So oftentimes I'm not the right person, or it's something as simple as like, why not me? You know, people say my story doesn't matter, I don't matter, but allow yourself the permission to share your experience, whether it's personally or professionally. I think professionally, you're wanting to have that cultural alignment with your jobs. You're seeing a big change in people with the gig economy and creating their own positions. So if you're a leader, you're giving yourself permission to be open. You don't necessarily need to share everything, but allow yourself to be human, because when we're human, then we can have empathy, especially in an age of machine learning and AI. When we can allow ourselves to be open, honest, and available, then we can connect on a deeper level. So I think if you give yourself the permission and realize to one story or to one person, to the world, you may be one person, but to one person, you may be the world. And so realizing, give yourself permission. Why not you?
Why not? And you also talk a lot about connection becoming currency.
Yeah, I think right now, more than ever, connection is crucial, because as we become disconnected from technology in society, you see it a lot more with young men who are playing video games. And they
Yeah,
don't have
when do they reach someone's eyes to talk to them?
nobody's looking eye to eye. One thing I
Right?
teach my daughter is immediately remember an individual's name. When you remember an individual's name, it shows that you care. But even if you've just met them, look at them, ask them their name, ask them if they're named after anybody. You'll be surprised about the magic that unfolds. They'll share a story just like we're talking about, and then you begin to build a connection. And I think oftentimes from a connection standpoint, that's the currency. That's the trust that we have when we can connect with a best friend, if we can connect with a stranger, if we can connect with a colleague. You'll notice that if you watch any Disney movie, there's always an animated character, or it's a person. It's just like Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey. In order for them to get to the promised land or to get to the end of the movie, connection is their currency, and they connect with either a best friend, they connect with a love interest, they connect with a little animated animal, you name it. But that allows them to see that they have the strength within them because they have connection, they have brotherhood, they have a sense of belonging and meaning. And then by the end of the second act, Joseph Campbell's, this is his words, not mine, is all is lost. And that's when this connection that they have, maybe the friend leaves, and it's up to the hero to realize that they have the power within them to reclaim the narrative and to reclaim their story. And then the happy ending.
Speaking of connection becoming currency, I would really love to hear about this men's group you created called Gents Journey. To be honest, when I read about it, I was like excited because I think there's too few resources for men. And I think it's wonderful that you've created this. So can you tell us about how the vulnerability within that circle helped you to find healing and meaning in your mother's passing, And how did the friendship and community you found reshape your relationship with grief? And then I want to ask you more about Gents' journey, about how the
Sure.
group works, how often you guys meet, and all of that. I think it's a wonderful resource for people.
Yeah, so that group that I mentioned, one thing we talk a lot about is vulnerability is invincibility. But oftentimes that's just a touchy word for men. But for us and for me, I was vulnerable when I was in a tough situation. And instead of putting your hands up and saying, I give up, put your hands out and say, I surrender. I surrender to the story. I surrender to the scenario. I surrender to the situation because it's happening for a reason. We might not know what it was. But when I moved here, I had a 1 month old. I had a virtual company. The pandemic happened. My mom was sick, so I was trying to take care. So I was in a position where I really didn't have much time, energy, love, anything. And I knew I was being stretched entirely too thin. And so I took a moment to myself. Obviously, it was maybe a couple of weeks, but I realized I needed someone or something to share some of these things with because my wife was too busy dealing with tons of other things. And my best friends, they're doing their own stuff. So I thought about friends that were fathers, that were founders, and that were, of the fellowship. They had a sense of faith. And I knew if they were founders or an entrepreneur, they'd have a flexible schedule. If they were a father, they'd have a lot of the similar issues that I was experiencing. And if they were of the faith, then they would understand, how to be spiritually minded. And so we started meeting once every week. And it allowed me to find a sense of community. I talk about it in my TEDx talk. I had to reconnect to who I was. I lost that sense of connection. Then I had to rebuild that community because I didn't have one. And then the last step was to reclaim that narrative or reclaim that sense of purpose. And so through these weekly meetings every Monday, we would talk about life. We would talk about loss, bankruptcy. We would talk about losing my mom. And it gave me what I needed in order to instill a sense of love, belonging, and to find that love for myself again because I was giving an awful lot of it away. I didn't realize really who I was anymore. So they helped me find that sense of purpose.
I think you also gave people permission to be real and vulnerable and authentic in their pain without, and be able to discard all the masks that they were wearing to protect
We say
them
that
from
we
that.
say that we that's one of our slogans that our co-founder said, remove the mask from masculinity, because we all wear masks in everything that we do. And so it's a lot easier to do it in a group of men that you trust and honor versus social media, although people do that now, which is great. You're seeing a shift, but there's some men who are open and vulnerable. We've actually had discussions about that word vulnerability where some people were not actually, some of the gents were not comfortable with that, and they wanted it to be brotherhood or building bonds because they didn't quite feel okay with that word of vulnerability. So that's an active conversation and a journey that we're exploring.
Yeah. And tell us, how big is Jen's journey? You meet on Monday nights. Is it all Zoom or on the internet?
Sure.
And is it open to any man, like anyone listening to this podcast, and they have a man who's grieving? Can they send them to Steve?
Send them over. So right now we have a community. It started out with 5 co-founders. We're down to 3 now because some of them had life that got in the way. But it's myself, colleague. His name is Matt McManus. He's a brilliant artist, writer, comedian. And then Dean Bakari. He's a self-help guru. He really helps people optimize their life and productivity. So we all have different backgrounds. We meet every Monday as the founders, and then we have a monthly meeting. We actually just had one yesterday where we have a Substack community of 6,000 members.
Wow.
So there's countless articles where you can read more about how to deal with grief. You can learn about how to optimize yourself. We actually have 7 core pillars that we came up with. We focus on friendship, family, fun, focus, fitness, freedom, and faith. And so we have a weekly newsletter called Gents Weekly that we send out. We have articles. We do live meetings. We also have some interviews that we do. And then we created a product. It's called the Journey Deck. And so the Journey Deck is available. What it is we took all of the meetings that we had experienced and we took the questions that really resonated, because each meeting we come up with a question and we talk about it. And we put it into a card deck so that any gent can carry this in their pocket. And instead of asking somebody at the next work meeting, somebody at the bus stop, or you're at a networking event. I literally went to a networking event 2 days ago. I bring this card deck with me. Pull out the card deck, and then you ask somebody to pull a card. Would you like to answer one, Irene? Tell me when to stop.
Okay, stop.
Oh, you got the directions. Okay, you got the... So you got the directions. But the question that landed on Irene was, who could use you in their corner right now? So we go deep. There's a couple lighter questions. There's some fun questions like, what's your favorite sandwich? But the idea is to create connection, to create friendship, to create a bond so that you can share who you really are. What's the answer to your question?
Who could use, I think that I'm in the corner of all the people, our entire audience.
Perfect.
I am.
All your
that's
listeners.
What this podcast, all my listeners, this is what this podcast is about, to help people to become motivated to heal and pull themselves out of suffering and know that they can change their lives in a lot of ways by changing the way they process their pain. And that is a question I have for you. If someone listening takes only one step toward healing today, what would you advise that step to be?
I think at the end of the day, it's important for us to truly share who we are and our experiences. We are all connected. We are. That's my personal opinion. We're all
we
one.
Are.
And to realize that, it allows us that the connective tissue between us are the stories that we carry. So when we write our own story, you have the power to write your own story. You have the power to share who you really are and to inspire others. And so at the end of the day, someone somewhere else is probably going through the same thing that you've gone through. I'm me. This is my experience. If you get value from it, great. If you don't, that's fine too. But I think at the end of the day, we all need to realize that we're all very unique. We all have a story to tell. And so find a stage, find a community, find a friend, find someone, because the simple act of sharing your story is going to help you within your healing journey, because just by getting it out, that's why they say you should write things down. If you have something that you want to do and you write it down, it not only gets it out of your head, but it presents it to the universe so that it can hopefully allow you to heal through that and achieve what it is that you want.
It sounds to me a lot like you're getting guys to, I mean, women have this problem too about being the people pleasing and being for everyone else in their lives, but you're starting to get them to be more nurturing themselves and taking care of themselves. And it's a form of self-love and acceptance of yourself, right? Without judgment.
Absolutely. I think it starts with us. This is an area that I struggled with and I still struggle with. You know, and you have the oxygen mask metaphor that's way overused. So the way that they put it in my little community that we spoke towards was, think of it like a fountain. You know, you go and you put a coin in the fountain, but learning to love ourselves for who we truly are. Oftentimes we have the story we tell ourselves that I'm bad, I'm not enough, I did this wrong. But it's all a bunch of BS, because we are all here to spread love, joy, peace on this earth. And so we all make mistakes. So the sooner that we can realize that, you know, everybody is human, we all have baggage, we all have missteps, we can change that narrative. And then once you change that narrative, you can love yourself, then you can share who you are, share your stories, and help others benefit from that.
Which you just crystallized the reason everyone should heal. They should work on healing, because their story matters, and it can change. Not only can it change your life when you heal, it can change other people's lives. You're walking the planet and you've got an energy. And if you are not struggling and suffering or angry or whatever is going on with you, because you've healed that part of yourself, you're helping all these, you're inspiring people around you. I want some of what he's doing over there. Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. And I think, so one thing that my youngest daughter, and I talk about this in my TEDx talk, she started saying at a young age, I don't know where she got it. I think it was my mother-in-law. But she started saying, love never ends. Love never ends. I want everybody to realize that love never ends. You may think that somebody is lost, but that's the physical attachment, the embodiment of who they are. But you have their memories. You have their experiences. You have the lessons that they've taught you. You have that love. And so whatever it takes for you to remember that, it could be a tattoo like I have on my arm. It could be a moment of meditation. could be a picture, but realizing that, just because somebody leaves or something is lost, that doesn't mean that it's gone.
Not only that, I've interviewed so many mediums, and believe me, our loved ones go on, and they're around us, and they're aware of what's going on in our lives, and they're pulling for us. They really are, and trying to help. So I also want to ask you, what is the Steve? You're so wise, Steve. What is your tip to people for finding joy in life? They're grieving, they're miserable, all these things are happening to them. Does that exclude their ability to be happy and find joy?
Obviously, yeah. Everybody deserves happiness and joy. And sometimes, like I said earlier, we look for the happiness and joy outside of ourselves, which it is what it is. If there's things that ignite you and make you feel happy and fun, maybe you like theme parks, take yourself to a theme park. I think going back to the great acronym that I talked about, having that sense of reflection, one thing that I do and that I have for my clients is to make sure that we have a note on our phones or a piece of paper that we keep track of the things that really light us up, that we love, and surround ourselves with those, but also realizing that we can find this joy and happiness and love within us. One really great tool, I was an actor for quite some time out of college before I got into media and marketing. And there's a book called The Artist's Way. You may have heard of it, with Julia Cameron. And one of the most profound exercises that she has was going back to your childhood and thinking about the 3 to 5 things that you wanted to be when you grew up, before society told you no, before you felt that, there was a story that you can't follow your dreams, before all of this mess started, that started to put you in a box, or that started to contain you or hold you down from who you are and what you truly wanted. But to think about the things that you wanted to be when you grew up, write them down. For me, it was a magician, it was an actor, it was a broadcaster, it was an athlete. So O.J. Simpson was my role model, but I have to change that around. Now I got to change it to like Michael Strahan.
Right.
And a fireman, because my dad was a fireman. And so one of the cool things, I just showed you this card deck. It allows me to feel like a magician, but the magic isn't me, it's you and the story you share. But go back to your childhood, think about the things or the positions or the things that you loved when you were so free, that vulnerable child where the world is your oyster, and find different ways that you could introduce these positions into your life. So if you like magic, watch a little magic trick, learn a magic trick. If you like firemen, go volunteer at the local firehouse or listen to the CB radio. I don't know, whatever it is that sparks it within. But these all live within us, and sometimes we turn them off. So we just have to shift focus a little bit, go a little bit deeper, and sit with our thoughts, sit with our prayers, and then have those aha moments. Oh, okay, great.
Fantastic. So true. Steve, your journey from childhood roles to profound loss, from holding everything together to finally allowing yourself to be held, shows us that healing is not linear, and it isn't solitary. It unfolds in community, in connection, and in the courage to share our stories. I really want to thank you for this beautiful conversation that aligns so deeply with the Spirit of Grief and Rebirth podcast, because you've illuminated how grief can open the path to rebirth. And from my heart, I wish you abundant blessings in your life with everything that you do.
Thank you so much, Irene, for sharing your story, for empowering so many lives, and for giving me the opportunity to speak to everyone. We're only here for a short amount of time, so why not have fun and connect with as many as people as we can while we're here.
And learn and lighten up. Basically, heal your stuff, lighten up, and start
if
to
it's
really...
fun, it gets done. That's what I tell my daughter. If it's fun, it gets done. Find the fun.
There you go. Thank you so much. As I like to say, to be continued.
Of course.
And I really, really do believe in what you're doing with Gents' journey. I think it's a wonderful, I think you're helping a lot of men.
Thank you so much.
How many men join you at a meeting? How many?
It varies. It could be 2, 10, 20, 100. It just varies. Sometimes schedules, we're playing with the time because it's a little tricky when you have so many people who are working. Are they available on weekends? And so it fluctuates. But at the end of the day, as if we help one person, it was worth it. Our goal is to help one person, then they can help everyone else that they see. So if there are any guys out there, come over to gentsjourney.co. Thank you.
Yeah, pass it forward. Thank you so much, Steve. Bye for now. To be continued.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to Grief and Rebirth. Remember, you can dive deeper into everything we've discussed by checking out the show notes and all past episodes at ireneweinberg.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and wherever you love to hang out online. Plus, we're on YouTube, so be sure to subscribe and never miss a video. For those of you listening, you'll find links to my 2 books, Good to the Last Drop and They Serve Bagels in Heaven, in the show notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see those books listed right above, so don't miss out. And here comes a special treat. If you sign up for Audible as a first-time user using my link, which you can find in the show notes, you can get They Serve Bagels in Heaven for free. And finally, people often ask me what I read, what I use, and what I recommend for healing and self-care. So I've carefully curated a compilation of those items to share with you. You can head over to kit.co/grief and rebirth to check them out. And to my cherished Grief and Rebirth podcast fans, stay tuned and see you again soon. Until next time, many blessings.